This one has two options. Spring gives you an interface called Handler Interceptor, and then they give you an adapter called Handler Interceptor Adapter, which is a convenience abstract or base implementation, which means you can pick and choose which actual method you want to implement. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Resolver. All right, so the very first one, and here's, I'll look at the Interceptor Adapter. There's three methods, and I'm going to ignore, there's one called after concurrent handling started. There's some special, this particular base class extends async handler interceptor, which allows you to deal with some of the async servlet 3 cool stuff coming out. I'm not going to go over that in detail. I think that's a whole talk in itself. But so I'll focus on the base methods, which is pre-handle, post-handle, and after completion. So pre-handle runs before the actual controller method gets called. Post-handle gets called after the controller method has executed. And then after completion is after everything is done, the response has been essentially written. There's a more robust, if you look up the code, if you follow the trail of implementations, the Java doc on those methods do a very good job of explaining all of the details around when they're executed. The other cool thing is, is the order, I guess. They are symmetric. So if you have two, I'll show you, I think the easiest way is to show you. All right, so now I'm finally getting to your question. So what is this this deprecated endpoint thing? Well, this is one of the things that all of the Spring stuff allows us to do, and half of this talk, and largely the second half, will go into some of the pains you get in a bigger team. So I have had a team of 16 developers, 16 people cranking out code. And so when you get into to that many people, it's hard to, wrangle them in if somebody goes off and tries to, do it their own way or that kind of stuff. It becomes interesting. And so some of the stuff is around how do you guide yourself and guide a team into code quality standards. There's a million ways to do everything, and so sometimes you just got to pick one and go with it. And if everybody's consistent, it's the best thing for the team. Things like that. That's why we use this kind of stuff. So one of them that we've used to communicate between teams, we've got lots and lots of teams working in the same web application. That web application is made up of a lot of different web services that only talk to each other via REST. How do we say, hey, this endpoint's old, it's deprecated, you got to move on to the next version? And so one thing we did to solve that problem was create a homegrown deprecated endpoint annotation. And so you throw that on there, you say, hey, this expires on this date or with this release, however you want to do it. And the replacement, and here there is no replacement, so good luck. But so let's go back to my view one example, and I'll show you how it automatically works. To do V1 tasks, execute, of course, that's the next example. All right. 200. Now, I'm going to actually look at the response headers, so I just look at it in raw view, which seems to be the best. Notice deprecated equals true. So that automatically comes back in every endpoint that has that deprecated endpoint mark on it, which means we can build a whole bunch of tools that inspect those headers and flag, send emails, whatever, give a display of how many times the deprecated endpoint's been hit. But in other words, we can automatically know that, hey, we've got some work to do. We got to go upgrade this endpoint. So that after you get this kind of information in there, you can do anything with it, right, as far as operationalizing it with your team. If you're working in a larger environment. If you're working in a smaller spot where you're in control of all the web assets, probably, wouldn't spend the time doing it. It's pretty handy. So the magic behind that then is in interceptors. So I have a deprecated endpoint interceptor. And what I did here is extended the adapter so that I could only implement the methods I was interested in. So in the pre-handle, here here's some of the heavier spring magic. In the pre-handle, I check to see if it's deprecated, passing in the request and the handler, or ultimately the controller and method that will handle the request. And if that is deprecated, then I add the header. And here's where you could also do anything. You could send an email alert. You could, take your poison. I'm not even kidding, there is a comment in our code from this point on that says it might be detrimental to your health if you read this code. So I'm not going to walk through this line by line. But some of the cool stuff is you can get the name at a high level, you can get the name of the handler, you can get the class that this is ultimately going to resolve to, and you can check it out. So you get the method, and you can find all the parameters or all the annotations in this case. So you just check to see if this deprecated endpoint annotation exists. Here's where once we've found the controller method, which is the hardest part, you find if this deprecated endpoint class exists on that method, and if it does, you have yourself a deprecated endpoint. Does that make sense? What did I want to do? I wanted to, not yet. Here, also I want to take a look at the logs. The second example I have for an interceptor is a caching interceptor. Is anybody, are you guys familiar with e-tags? Okay, so the sunglasses looks good. So e-tags being a web cache, so once I say I've got a list of tasks, that list of tasks is not going to change unless I add another task. And so from the time that I get the last list of tasks, you can return an e-tag header, which is a GUID that represents that resource. And next time I go ask for it, I pass that e-tag back in and I say, hey, I'm getting the same thing. Has it changed? And if it hasn't changed, that's where you get the HTTP response code 304, not modified. So here's where I can show you. If I come in and I get the tasks again, so I got them right here. If I get them again, I get a 304 because I'm in a very simple cache that I'll show you. But I know that that endpoint has already been hit and that nothing has changed. Now, if somebody comes in and creates a new task, I'll do what's called invalidating the cache, and I'll wipe it out so that the next time you come and get it, you get all of the latest data. So something like this means that I can have a cache interceptor that does all this for me with a tiny bit of configuration, and I'm not in every single endpoint saying, okay, does this exist in the cache first, and then moving on to the business line. So I'll take a quick peek behind the scenes. And the reason I pulled this up is the order of the interceptor. So I have two interceptors running that get hit on this request. And you can see that the deprecated endpoint interceptor pre-handle goes first, then the cache interceptor pre-handle, then the cache interceptor post-handle, then the deprecated endpoint interceptor post-handle. So that's what I meant by symmetric. It's like, I guess that illustrates it. I don't know how to better describe it. Oh yeah, and then I can continue going down this. For some reason, I thought it was repeating. After that, then we get the caching interceptor after completion and the deprecated endpoint after completion. Then it starts over again. Very good question. For this application that is trivial, thank you, that reminded me I didn't show you this other thing either. Here's back to Java Spring configuration. If you have done this in XML, you know that you do annotation driven, and then there's an MVC namespace. This is the replacement for the MVC namespace. And so I throw enable WebMVC as an annotation on my Java Spring config class. And then how I add in Interceptor is I extend WebMVC configure adapter, and then I can override this add interceptor method and add. And right now it followed this order for custom interceptors. Now there's Spring interceptors that also get run, and I don't touch those. So those run first, and then these run. And then I can't remember, Brian, if you remember, but is it the ordered interface for this? Or is that for handler exception?
The exception. With the finding the order.
Yeah, it's just the configuration, right?
Yeah, right.
Super question?
Yeah.
It might be 3.1. I think it might be 3.